Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Please excuse my voice. I'm still a little hoarse from my cold, but I'm going to do my best. And I really wanted to share this fun idea with you. I got this pattern paper with some copper foiling on it the other day, and I thought it was so pretty. It's also double-sided, so I know it can cause us a little stress working with double-sided paper, so I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. The stamps I'm using today are from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them at pegstamps.com and use the coupon code Lindsay17 to save 20% on your peg stamp order of $10 or more. I'll have all the details in the video description. I'm going to begin by using some very pale aqua colored ink and a mason jar from the Summer on the Farm unmounted set to stamp on watercolor paper. I love to do this technique because it really gives it a light and breezy look, and the paper, the pattern paper I'm using, has watercolor designs on it, so keeping that soft muted palette is really going to look nice. So if I want to watercolor this and I can't get my stamping ink to move from the lines that I stamped, what I do is I press my ink pad onto my acrylic block, add a little water from a water brush or a wet paint brush, and then I can just kind of paint with that. That gives me a very soft, subtle look, and it just looks really natural. You really can't mess this up, especially for a beginner technique. If I find my ink is not dark enough to give me the impact that I want for some of the glass, I simply take a marker, scribble that on my block in a little bit darker of a color, and I go ahead and watercolor with that as well. Remember, if you don't have an ink pad in the right color ink, you can use any water-based marker, even your kids' Crayola markers, to function as a stamp pad. You just color the rubber of the stamp with the marker and you stamp it as usual. It's a really wonderful technique. I also like to drag a little bit of shadow color into the bottom underneath the mason jar just to give it a little bit of a solid ground to kind of rest on. I recommend you look at the pattern paper you're going to use when you choose your ink. I decided to go with some peachy oranges, corally pinks, and a couple of different shades of earthy greens to match the watercolor designs on the pattern paper I'm using. I'm using a couple spiky flowers from the Wisteria Garden set, and I was inspired by a brand new release from Rubber Stamp Tapestry. They have this beautiful lavender flower set that I can't wait to get my hands on, and I was really drawn to those spiky flowers. So I thought, well, for now I'm going to recreate that look with what I have, but that's definitely on my to-buy list. I'm using a big kind of bushy spiky leaf stamp from the Sunny Daisy set to kind of fill in some of that big area, and now I'm going in with the fern from Dogwood Forest to give me a little bit more of a tightly packed foliage at the bottom of the jar. You just want to kind of look at the stamp sets you have and see how you can bring elements together from different sets to really get bang for your buck when you're working with peg stamps. That's what I really like about them, because every set I add makes all my other sets more useful. I pressed that dark green ink pad I was just using onto a clear block, and I'm using my water brush to paint some stems coming down from those ferns. Whenever you're painting a clear vase, you have to make sure that you can see the stems within the vase, or it's not going to make very much sense to the viewer looking at your card. To add a finishing touch to this card, I'm using a tiny little blossom, and I believe it's from Auntie's Strawberry Patch stamp set, and I'm going to put a few little brighter color pinkish flowers around the arrangement. It's also a great way to carry the design on your paper, like maybe stamp a few on the ground, like a few petals have fallen. It's just a wonderful way to kind of cross-pollinate that design and make the card look put together. Once you've stamped this, you're going to want to let it dry before we do the next step. Now this image is really lovely as it is, but I want to make it a little bit extra pretty. So what I'm doing is taking a glue pen and I'm hitting just here and there detailed elements of my vase and flowers. So I'm kind of doing the edges of the vase. I'm doing any of the wording like on the ball jar. I'm just kind of letting the glue pen kind of pick up any little highlights. I'm hitting the edges of some of the petals on the flowers and leaves, and I'm basically just trying to balance where I put the little bits of glue. This pen's kind of neat because it goes down blue, so you can kind of see where your glue is, because it's a little bit blue, and then it's going to dry clear. As soon as it goes clear, it's going to be a little tacky, and then you can sprinkle on some glitter for a really magical effect. Once I'm done applying the glue pen, I like to tip it to the light a little bit so I can kind of see the reflections and see where I've put the glue, because like I said, it goes clear and it's hard to see. So once you're happy with how much glue you've put down, you've made sure that it's fairly balanced, then just sprinkle on a little ultrafine clear glitter. This is just a very, very clear iridescent glitter, and then you want to tap the excess off, and you'll be dumping that back in the jar after, but look how much it just shimmers and sparkles and how subtle and pretty it is. I thought my image would look pretty with a frame, so I'm simply inking the edges of my panel with that corally pink colored ink. And I decided I wanted it to be a little bit bolder than just a thin line, so I'm pressing a clear block against that same ink pad, picking up some of that color with a water brush and adding that to my edge. Now, if I had inked the edges with a distress ink pad, I probably could have just used a wet brush and pulled the ink that I had put on the edges around, but with other ink pads it doesn't work. So you'll get to know your ink pads and what you can do with each one. Remember, if you don't have an ink pad, you can scribble a marker down on that block and you can make your watercolor palette that way. Whatever you want to do is fine to get the look that you're after. Now it's time to put our card together. I decided to make a 5x7 white card, and what I have here is a piece of pattern paper cut to 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. So I'll have about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. I am punching about a 1/4 inch circle in each corner, and then I'm using these snaps. You could use brads or buttons or whatever you want to complete this look in each corner. I don't think you can get these anymore. These are a moldy oldie from the company Making Memories, but I like them. So when I was doing my major craft room purge, I kept them because I liked them. I love the way they look. They're such a pretty color, and I think they're really fun. They do make this panel a little thick, and the reason I'm not attaching them to my card this way is because I don't want to have them showing on the inside. But I'll show you how I deal with that in a little bit. I also think this little kind of journaling card XOXO block needs a little frame, so I am adding that same ink I used on the focal point on the edges of that as well. Now this right here is actually a cut off strip from the top of that sheet of paper, and I cut it in half because it's double-sided, and so I'm basically using a part you would throw away from your pattern paper to embellish this card. So I really like that sort of technique. I'm going to notch the ends of each of these pattern paper strips, the skinny ones, just with a pair of scissors. Now, this is kind of a ribbon technique, so if you'd prefer to use ribbon on your card instead of strips of pattern paper, go for it. Use whatever you want, using what you have on hand. Make the best use of the supplies that you have, and really let your personality show through on whatever card you're making. You don't need to make one that looks exactly like mine. Use the tips and tricks that you like to create the artwork that you want to make. Before I glue anything down, I like to just kind of fiddle around with my pieces of paper and embellishments and make sure I really like the way it looks. I'm not sure if I want to overlap my elements, my focal element with my title card, my greeting, or not. So I take this opportunity to kind of push things around and see exactly what I like and what it needs. You can kind of see the glimmer from that, the glitter we put on our focal image. I think it's so pretty. So fuss around with that a bit until you get a design that you really like. I glued down everything except for my focal point, and I decided I wanted to wrap a little bit of cording around that center piece, the larger kind of strip that's got the succulents painted on it, because I thought that my card needed a little bit of organic natural texture. So cording, ribbon, burlap, anything like that that's like soft natural fiber will really fit the bill when you want that sort of element in your work. I think it's especially nice when you have a card like this. It's kind of shabby chic to have something softer that's pliable. It just gives you that kind of yin and yang of textural elements, I think. And I just knotted that in a bow. You could also thread that cord through a ribbon, through a button rather, and tie it in a bow there. That would be really pretty as well. I decided to use dimensional foam adhesive to stick down my focal image just to give it a little bit more depth and importance in the card design. So then I can press that down on top of my paper strips and leave a little gap between that and the title element, and I think it just makes it look really pretty. So now all we have left to do is to put this onto our card, and to do that we are going to use a trick that I learned from fellow card maker Jennifer McGuire. If you look at the card here from the side, you can see how those snaps are making the card higher on the corners than it is in the middle. So I found this scrap of Funfoam in my kids' art supply bucket, and I'm just going to add some adhesive to the back of this and stick it on the back of my my front panel, and then I'm going to adhere the whole sandwich right to the card. I will warn you though that Funfoam tends to be kind of non-stick, so it can be a little bit tricky to get your adhesive to stick to it. So you might want to try score tape or maybe rubber cement to adhere Funfoam, but the look is really nice. I only do it for cards where I've got a really bumpy element that I can't get my panel to lay flat otherwise, just because I kind of worry about the foam in the landfill, so I only do it once in a while, but it does give it a really beautiful professional look. I hope you enjoyed this project. I had a really good time making it, and I think it's a great way to use double-sided paper. If you can take a little sliver from the back side, flip it over, really make the most bang for your buck, and if you can use those off-cut pieces from the edges of your pattern paper, it's all the better, because that's practically free supplies. Please check out our sponsor, Rubber Stamp stamp tapestry. You can find them online at pegstamps.com and use the coupon code Lindsay17 to save 20% on your $10 or more peg stamp order. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.